want you to imagine, so imagine for a moment, you're the CEO of a large established company, not necessarily Pfizer, but any large established company, and you're overseeing presentations for next year's budget requests. You're faced with a request between two projects, and you have $1 million to spend. The first project is a long-term speculative endeavor. There is no clear ROI, or return on investment, on this project. It's somewhere far into the future, but it has a lot of possibility to transform. The second is a project for a mature brand. It's well established. It has a pretty short payback, less than 2 years potentially, and it has a well-worn pathway in terms of its return on investment. It's been done before, it's known. So as the CEO, I'd like to ask you, by standing up, if you're very likely to invest in the speculative project, stand up for just a moment, stretch those legs out if you're very likely. I'll give you a moment just because I know our hamstrings might be a little sore. Great. If you are somewhat likely, please stand up. Oh, a lot more people, a lot of people riding the fence. And lastly, if you're not likely at all to invest in that speculative project, please stand up. Who's not likely to invest? Don't look around, just stand up. Very few people. So I'd like to just call this out as a really shining example of what really happens in the corporate boardroom. There are speculative projects that have the possibility of transformation that smash head to head with the things that are ongoing operations in your business. And it becomes a real source of conflict of how do you keep the lights on while at the same time investing in high innovation, radical or disruptive innovation. And that is the challenge that we often face. I have a neighbor back in New Jersey whose name's Tony. Tony runs one of the largest black car services in the New York metropolitan area. Third generation business, it's been running for almost 50 years, and it's been very profitable, very successful. Tony is extremely proud of the work that his family and he has done. When I told him that I work in innovation, he got super excited, and he told me about all the cool things that they do. They invested in GPS for their cars. They started creating this swapping program with mechanics in the tri-state area. Really incrementally cool things that have kept the business running. I know very little about the car service business, so I was really just more or less listening. And then I remembered, I'd read an interesting article in Inc. magazine. This is, by the way, 2010, just as a reference. I'd read this article about this new upstart business that was testing its concept in Lower Manhattan, in which you could flag a car down using your smartphone, and immediately payment would be registered and would change the whole process of catching a taxi or reserving a car service. A total disruption. So I was really excited to tell Tony about it. You probably know what company I'm talking about. Anybody want to guess? Yeah. Uber. Could have been Lyft car also, but Uber 2010. Uber, I thought, was such a great story, and I thought this was a great way for him to really get ahead of the game. And Tony's smile turned immediately into a frown, and he said to me, Dan, there's two things you need to know about the car service industry. Number one, it's about trust. Number two, it's about relationships. No Uber is going to change trust and relationships. The industry is not changing. So I left it at that. He did tell me that they had a website also, so I thought that was pretty progressive. So we kind of left it there. Sure enough, time passed, and Tony and I ran into each other again, probably about 6 months ago. You might know where this is going. I asked Tony the cliche question, how's business? So Tony said to me, I've been Ubered. It's now a verb, I didn't know that. His business has been declining. Less repeat customers that used to come back to him religiously. Less new customers that he was getting at the same clip rate. Sales are down, profit is hurting. He's trying to figure out what to do. Now, to steal a line from John Hockenberry, what's the takeaway? For me, the takeaway is this. My friend Tony is a very good businessman. He's a smart guy. He's run his business very successfully. But because he's so good at what he does, because he was investing in all the incremental things that keeps his business running, Tony was staring down the barrel of disruption. The future was right in front of him. He could have done something potentially about this, but he didn't. And the reason why is well-managed companies, like Tony's, struggle to be innovative because they're well-managed companies. Now, this may seem very obvious, but for me, this is a big point. Pfizer is not that different than Tony's car service. We're not that different. Well-managed companies are focused on the next quarter and trying to deliver on expectations while also staying ahead of the curve to a certain extent. But there is a strong gravitational pull back to the core of what you do. I guarantee you it's true in your hospitals, in your businesses, it's true at Pfizer. And the question is, what's getting in the way? What stops us from being able to multitask, to do both the speculative project as well as also the ongoing operational stuff? So I'm going to key in on just two things, just in the interest of time. But it's multivariate, to be sure. It is multivariate. But there are two things I think we can get at pretty quickly and do things about. And I'll tell you in a moment about things we are doing at Pfizer to do it differently. The first is business as usual often masquerades as innovation. What do I mean by that? Well, the things, like go back to Tony's example, which he's calling innovation, are not really innovation. They're incremental improvements. They're keeping the lights on. But because we call it innovation, when everything is called innovation, nothing is innovation. And that becomes a challenge because you don't have a meaningful portfolio, a portfolio of innovation that you can maintain. And incremental improvements have become the standby for innovation for most organizations, and they end up weakening the resolve of the leadership of your company. So if you say we're doing a ton of innovation, that's great, but if the innovation is just the basic blocking and tackling, it's not enough. And it stymies the possibility of big disruptive stuff that can bring down the cost of healthcare and transform the industry. The second thing that I want to key in on are the usual suspects. This is a normal lineup. There are many experts and people from within the organization that you work with, and those same folks bring in an entrenched mindset. It doesn't mean they're not talented, that they're not bright, that they don't have good ideas, but when you go to the same well, you get the same water. We need to get out of that well. We need to get into a different river of thinking. So the usual suspects is a challenge that can also stifle innovation within your organization. So what are we doing differently? So there are a few things I want to highlight that we're doing differently that I think really are going to make and are making a difference. The first thing, this may look a little bit like an eye chart for up you there, but I want to just key in on, this is about culture. So we talked about culture right at the beginning. I'm going to come back to it. If you want to change a culture, you have to shift the mindset. The mindset in the organization is focused on incrementalism, usually. So you have to shift the way the organization is thinking. So we have made a pretty large endeavor to do that. A program, a movement, really more of a social movement within the organization called Dare to Try. So Dare to Try at Pfizer is an innovation and experimentation program, getting people to think more entrepreneurially, taking more thoughtful risks, and also thinking more innovatively in their everyday. On the innovation side, it's going from a problem, clearly primed and focused problem, to an insight-based ideas. The ideas are based in using lateral thinking techniques. We talked about design theory a little bit this morning, or it's touched upon. We use elements of design thinking and creative problem solving to get people to think differently about how we approach problems. The second piece, or the other side of the balance sheet, so to speak, is experimentation, something that in our labs we do well, but on the commercial side of the business, it's not done nearly as well. It's about taking small wagers, scaling them fast or failing them fast, and learning from them. We heard about errors and mistakes this morning and how hard it is to admit that you make mistakes or admitting you have errors and tracking them. Well, it's the same thing with experimentation. We are only going to get breakthrough ideas when we actively experiment and learn from what doesn't work. A la Thomas Edison, all the great inventors and innovators of the past several generations. The way we're making this real within Pfizer to get people to live this is running series of workshops. Now, I know my first reaction was like, oh, workshops, but it's multi-level. We train champions or advocates in the organization, and then we take real business problems from the teams within the company. They bring these real challenges, which, quite frankly, many people are skeptical and say it's not going to be solved in a multiple-day workshop. We teach, we apply, and people see real results. Not everybody comes up with a breakthrough idea. In fact, the majority are incremental. But if 20% of your ideas are transformative or have the potential to be transformative, you have a real innovation portfolio. And that is really where disruption is going to come from. Directly related to this is the idea of thinking outside the normal conceptual borders. We are actively remixing what works from outside of healthcare and pharmaceuticals. Traditionally, when people were looking for solutions to existing problems, we went to, well, what did another team at Pfizer do? What have other people done in the pharmaceutical industry? We're actively pushing our colleagues to look outside of pharmaceuticals, outside even of healthcare, and to see what works and why. An example, just to make this come alive for you, is in the area of smoking cessation. Pfizer has had investments for many years in smoking cessation, both in terms of products, grants, and work that we've done. One of the real stubborn problems that probably is pretty top of mind for many people, if you know or live with or have been yourself a smoker, is it's a very lonely, solitary journey trying to quit smoking. So we tried many different things with mixed success, and we decided to look outside of smoking cessation, outside of pharmaceuticals, and said, where else do people take solitary, isolated journeys that's a difficult climb where they need support? And we landed on the idea of the New York City Marathon. The New York City Marathon was a really interesting analog because in the marathon, people start their journey, but the New York City Marathon has provided a sponsorship network of friends and family to both financially sponsor, as well as also to provide encouragement and support every step of the way of the marathon, down to the point of tracking them on your smartphone while they're running and seeing what they're doing and be able to congratulate them when they finish. We asked, why couldn't you do that with smokers? Why can you not make it a celebration of something they're doing where they get support from friends and family rather than something that's isolating? So we took that, we adapted and remixed it, and we came up with an experiment in Russia, a very highly prevalent area of smoking, somewhat degree of indifference towards quitting smoking. Difficult place to do it, but we figured if you could do it there, you could do it anywhere. We ran some experiments in Russia, and we found this idea called the gift of quit, where friends and family sponsored the quit attempt of a loved one and supported them through their journey. And we did that by looking at what works outside of our normal domains. I would ask you to think about that for yourselves as well, is what is done differently. If you translate your problems generally, agnostically, and you pull out the possibility or the idea behind it, you will find that there's creative solutions lurking in every category and in every area. Last couple things I'm going to mention. One thing going outside the conceptual borders for ideas, it's another thing going outside the borders of your company. This has traditionally been very difficult in the pharmaceutical industry and other industries. We do partnerships, but the truth be told, people look for their ideas where they're most comfortable and where they have seen them in the past. So if you're looking to solve a problem, you might start right within your company. We're trying to push that thinking with open innovation models, both inside our company and outside. Just to give an example, inside our company, our research and development group was trying to figure out how they might be able to develop a new use of an older medicine to help patients create new value for them. This team wrestled with this idea for quite a while. They came up with very conventional solutions that they had often come up with before. So they said, well, what if we just reached out to all 77,000 people at Pfizer? Let's see what we got back. So they framed it as a challenge, they gave some background, and what they ended up getting back was 116 different proposals. 116, some which really weren't very viable, but a number that had incredible possibility. And what's most fascinating is it came from disparate corners all around the world from our organization, from people who would never have been asked otherwise. And that's where open innovation really can make a difference. Likewise, looking outside your organization as well. Open innovation's been around. The term was coined probably almost, I think, 50 years ago. And people have been practicing it. Companies from Procter & Gamble, other healthcare companies, particularly in the research and development space. But only now are we starting to recognize that can change our innovation model. And a great example has been in our pharmaceutical sciences teams trying to come up with a new pediatric medicine to make it more palatable for children they wanted to adhere better to their treatment. They tried many things with limited success, and they decided, let's open this up. They put it out on an open innovation platform, and what they got back were a number of really novel proposals, which only now are starting to change the way we're doing things within our organization and are leading to a potential disruption that in the past we wouldn't have discovered. So open innovation opens the doors. Second to last thing I'm going to touch on is the entrepreneurial world. Just a couple of words on it because you're going to hear about it from Jeff in a moment. We believe that we need to find inspiration also from the entrepreneurial world, as well as the corporate world and the academic setting. And we've done that by partnering with different groups like Rock Health, Mass Challenge, Blueprint. These are health tech incubators and accelerators. And what we've done, which has become rather interesting, is bring our problems to them rather than them in coming to pitch to us. We've created forums like the Entrepreneurs Cafe, in which we get introduced to them, we bring our problems and our challenges, and they start bringing their technologies, their ideas, and their solutions to come up with novel possibilities so that we can collaborate. And it also has the double benefit of infusing the entrepreneurial spirit, which is often lacking in a corporate setting, and changes the way we approach problems and the way we problem solve. Last but certainly not least is the way we're reinventing the traditional partnering model. In the past, if you were going to work with a team of investigators or academic researchers, there was effectively a firewall, segregation between the developments that they were coming up with, and then they would come, do a due diligence, and you'd either acquire the intelligence from them. It was very segregated, very isolated. It was a very linear path. Pfizer has developed a center called the Center for Therapeutic Innovation. It's a separate entity. It's not at Pfizer. They're in 4 locations, right where the researchers are. And what's unique about it is it pairs scientists at Pfizer alongside, literally working elbow by elbow with the researchers at other academic institutions. And we make available to them our screening technologies, our libraries of molecules, all of the things that really make a large company like Pfizer very viable are now being put at the disposal of these researchers, and we find an equitable way to work together so that early on you can accelerate ideas and innovations that bring medicines to market faster, more cost effectively, which hopefully in the future will bring down the cost of healthcare and medicines. So I'll close with this. In the past, it was all about how fast you could go. We always talked about being the first to market, the first out of the pack, being the biggest, being the best. But there's an old African proverb you may have heard before. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I believe that that is really where the solution lies, that we have to go together to be able to create meaningful, disruptive, transformative innovation that changes the game and changes the way we work together and the way we survive in a changing world of healthcare. Thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to chatting with you all.
Let me just say, Dan, lots of people want to chat with you.